Hello everyone, welcome back to our Angular series. So in this video, we want to talk all about Angular forms. There are two types of forms in Angular, one which is called a template-driven form, and the other is called a reactive form. So template-driven forms, as the name suggests, are used in templates and work directly with the HTML and are very good with two-way binding. And reactive forms are used in the component. They give a little bit more flexibility and programmability to your forms, and we'll talk about both and what the differences are. We'll also talk about form validation and how to use them within the Angular class. So let's dive right in. All right, so we're in our people app, and the first thing we always do is make sure that our node modules is installed properly. I'm just going to jump over to my terminal here, just do an npm install. I have to make sure that I'm in the root of the application and everything looks good, and so I'm going to do an ng-serve. And the ng-serve is going to bring up my application. And if I come over here, this is currently what we have in our application. If you remember where we left off, this is the number of people. We had a pipe that calculates the number of people. And as we delete these people, the number of people goes down. And so if we refresh this page, all these people actually come back. So we'll deal with that problem a little bit later on. What we want to do in this topic is talk about inputs that come in from the form. So as I said, there's a couple of different types of forms or different types of inputs. The first one is a template form. And so this comes from a forms module. The first thing that we're going to do here is go into our source, and we're going to find in the application, the app module, app.module.ts, and we're going to import a module here. So we're going to import this thing called forms module, and this is coming from Angular/forms. So that it's from the Angular scoped package under forms, and we're going to have to go into our imports, and we're going to have to import this. So we're going to, in addition to our browser module, import our forms module. And now we have forms that we can attach to the template. So where we want to put this first one is, let's go into people list, and I'm going to go over to the HTML. And I'm going to put in something that allows me to do a search on the people. So not only write the number of people that are currently in my application, but actually allow me to have a search string associated with that. So I'm going to do a search, and I'm going to provide an input, and this is going to be an input type text. And in a second, we are going to attach a model to one of the variables that are inside. So for now, we can come over to our TS file. And if you remember earlier, we had this query, which was a string. And when we called the constructor, we made this query equal to empty string. So I said I'd come back to it, and now we're back. So I'm just going to print out this query string just so that we can see what's going on here. So I'm just going to do a quick interpolation, and we're going to print out query. And here is where most of the magic is going to happen. There is an ng model, which I can attach to the query variable. Okay. So if you remember what the square bracket and the round brackets are, the square brackets are essentially property binding, and the round brackets are event binding. So we're actually combining both to say that I'm listening for an event and I'm attaching a property to query. And this will actively listen for a query to change, and it will just print this out. So hopefully this will work. So let's take a look on here. So we have a search, and then we have this input. So if we type in, well, whatever we type in, right, it's going to be reflected in the printing of that variable. So you can see that as I type, this gets reflected. Okay, great. So we can update this query variable. And as we do, I want to be able to filter out some of these people as well. Okay, so how I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a pipe. So I'm going to do an ng generate pipe, and I'm going to skip tests again. And I'm going to create a pipe called search. All right, so if you remember what happened before, we take a look at app modules. It will create a pipe for me. So here, this is creating a module called search pipe, and it's bringing it from search.pipe.ts file, and it's putting it in the declarations. And if we take a look at search.pipe.ts, it's going to give this. Now, again, we have to perform a transformation, but this time we have to understand that the transformation is not outputting an integer, rather it's outputting a array. So if we do this transformation, we're going to take in people again, right? So from a list of people, and I'm just going to call it an any array. Again, it's not good style to do this. I guess every time you see any in this tutorial, you can just imagine that this is the people type, or the person class that I'm going to put in here eventually. All right, we also require a query string. So this query string is just a variable that I'm going to pass in. It is in as a type string, and as a return, I'm going to return these person arrays. All right, so how we're going to return this is that we will take people. Actually, we do need to do a return, and we'll take people, so the people variable that's being passed in here, and then we're going to filter out for each person. We're going to figure out whether or not they're p.name to lowercase dot includes. So if there is a substring that is in this query string dot to lowercase, then I'm going to keep them to lowercase. All right, so this is going to be the pipe that I define. So this takes people and as well as a string, which is a query string, and it's going to return, well, our new list of people. Okay, so whatever the query string is, if the query string is found within each one of those people's names, then it's going to keep them. Otherwise, it'll filter it out. So if we come back to here, we do want to check what our query is, but instead of people now, I'm going to pipe this into our search. And again, maybe we should come back in here and show you that search is how we invoke this pipe. So we're going to do search, and then we're going to pass in this query. Okay, so this query variable, we're going to pass it into the search, and this is kind of like the second parameter that we define in our transform function. All right, and then we're going to count the people. All right, in addition to doing that, you see down here, this ng4 is printing out all of the people. So I'm going to pipe the people into this search as well. So search as well as the query, and this hopefully will give me back only those people that are filtered. All right, so let's see if this works. I'm going to come over here under our search, and I see, well, Bobby. So if I start typing B, you'll see it filters out everyone who doesn't have a B. And then as I type more, it'll filter out everybody who has those substrings. So again, I see a J and A. And then as soon as I press the N, it will filter out those that don't have that substring. Okay, so this seems to be working pretty well, and this is our first example of an input. This again is a template input. You see I put it directly into the template. So what if I wanted something a little bit more elaborate? What if I wanted a whole component that has a form in there? So let's talk about that next. I'm going to create another component here called person add form. So I'm going to do an ng generate, and this time I'm going to generate a component, and again skip tests equals to true, and this time I'm going to call it we'll call it person add component, or actually add form. Okay, so this is a good description of what I'm doing. So again, if we check the app.modules, it has created that component for me. It's added the declaration. All right, so next, what we have to do is, remember in here, we added a forms module. This new type of form I'm going to add is called a reactive form. So I'm going to come in here and create a reactive forms module, or bring in reactive forms module, and I'm going to declare that in the imports as well. So we're going to do the reactive forms module. Okay, so this allows us to be able to create a form dynamically from our TS file. All right, so the next thing we'll do is come back to our person add component, and the first thing is let's jump into our TS file. I'm going to start with making a form property, which is of the type form group. So a form group is going to define for us a form, which inside has all of the controls that we're going to need to create this form in HTML. So form group comes from Angular/forms, so we have to import that. This is going to be form. Okay. Oh, it's complaining right now that it has not been initiated. So I'm going to create this constructor, and I'm first going to create an object, which are the form controls. So the form controls are basically everything that we can interact in this form. So all of the inputs associated with this form. So I'm going to start with name, which is one of the attributes that I want to collect from to create a new person. So this is going to be a new form control, and form control, notice that it gets imported from Angular Forms. So the next thing is going to be instructor. This is eventually going to be a checkbox, which is going to be a Boolean. But for now, it's going to be another form control. And the third thing is I'm going to collect the age, which is going to be an input number. But again, we'll make it a new form control. Okay, so now in my form, I have three things I want to collect from the user: a name, an instructor, and an age. And then I'm going to take this form, so this dot form, and I'm going to create a new form group out of it. So new form group, and I'm going to pass in as the first parameter the form controls, right? So all of these things I'm going to use for collecting data from the form, and I could add more things in here as well. I'll talk about how to do that in 1 second. Now, while we're here, I'm going to add one more method to this class, which is onSubmit. So what happens when I submit this form? Okay, so this is just a method that I'm just going to create. There's going to be a new person that is passed in, and as I said, anytime you see an any, this is going to represent a person, just because I was too lazy to create this class. So this new person with any is going to represent the new person that's being created. For now, I'm just going to do a console.log. I'll come back in another video and talk about what we can do with this new person. All right, so this should be good for now. So if we jump over to personadd.html, currently it just says person add form works. So theoretically, what we want to add here is the actual HTML that's going to attach it to our TS file. So I'm going to start by creating a form tag, and I'm going to get rid of the action. And in this form, I'm going to put a bunch of inputs. But before we do that, I want to just associate this property called form group with the form. Okay, and also I want to listen for ng submit. Now remember, this round bracket is a event binding. So ng submit is the event that's going to fire when I submit this form. So somehow when I submit this form. So what do I want to happen? I want to call the function onSubmit, and I want to give it the form.value. Okay, the form.value is this form that I'm working in right now. Okay, whatever value is inside, I just want to send that. So this is going to be sent in the shape of an object. All right, so let's do a field set. And for this field set, just so that we can have a little bit of bootstrap attached to it, I'm going to do a dgrid, and I'm going to do a gap2, and then column 12. This is going to span across the whole width of this form. All right, in here, I'm going to provide a legend, and legend is going to do add person. Okay, and before I forget, I'm going to come over here and go into the CSS. I'll have legend is going to be text aligned center. Okay, just so that it's going to be centered aligned later on. And let's create some inputs. All right, so just going to have a text input. So the text input is going to be the name of the person. All right, so let's just define a couple of things here. So we have the type. I'll define the name as well. So the name is going to be called the name. The placeholder is going to be name. So this is going to appear on the text box itself. And then here's the key. We have a form control name. So the form control name is the one that is going to attach it to the form control. And we called it name before. So this, if we go back to our TS file, is going to attach it to this variable here. Okay, so that's our form control name. All right, so I'm going to repeat this process for all the other inputs as well. So I'm going to do another input here. And for this input type, this is going to be a number, and this is going to represent our age. So let's just give it a little bit of room here, and we'll do name is age. Okay, so just for the name attribute is just for programmability reasons. So later on, when we actually send this to a server, the name attribute will be the one that is taken from the body. More on this in a later video. So form control name is going to be age. So this one is the one that, again, is attached to our TS file. And then the final thing is maybe we want a placeholder here, and we'll just say age. Okay, so just to prompt the user to say this is what I want you to input. All right, next, let's create a div box here just for our class. So our class equals form check. And in here, I want to create an input, which is of checkbox. So this is our checkbox. And again, give ourselves a little bit of room here. I'm going to call it name instructor checkbox. We're going to have ID. We'll call it instructor checkbox as well. And form control name is going to be instructor. So this one is important. This one has to attach to the TS file again, has to associate with that. And then finally, we'll add some bootstrap classes to this. So we'll do form-check input. All right, and then finally, we'll add a label to this. So label for instructor checkbox. So this refers to the ID instructor checkbox. And I'm also going to have a class, which is form check label, I believe. Okay, so hopefully all of this will give us something in Bootstrap, and this will give me, I will label this as the instructor. Okay, one last thing to put into our form here. So after this div, I will create a button, which is going to allow us to save a person. All right, so we have a button here, and we'll create a class called button. We'll do button outline primary. And that should be enough for now. All right, so in the button, I just want to have the word save. Okay, good. Now we can take a look at what this looks like, but before we do that, we need to attach this to a component, because currently, although we have a template here, and if we check back to our person add form.ts, we have a selector called app person add form, but we haven't added it anywhere. So maybe let's put it in the people list HTML. So after we print out all of these people, at the very bottom, let's print out the add form. Now this probably is not the best place to put it, and in another section, we'll actually move this somewhere else. But for now, it'll give us an idea of what it looks like. So you see here that we have all these people. If we scroll down, we should be able to see our add person. Okay, so this looks pretty good. This spans the whole width of my form, which is what I wanted. And so we can actually put a name in here, and we can put an age, and we can check off instructor. And now when we click save, it will So when we click save, what we've programmed this to do, if we go back to our TS file, is it's going to send it to onSubmit. And right now, it's just going to log whatever this new person is. So if we click save, you'll see that this is the object that is being sent and being logged. But right now, it's not being added to this list or anything like that. Okay, so I want to save this for a later point. But for now, I just want you to see that this is what's being logged. We have the name, we have the instructor, we have the age, which is exactly equal to our form control. All right, so this is looking pretty good to me. The last thing I want to do is actually add a little bit of validation. So validation, I really don't have enough time in this video to talk about all the ways that we can validate, but definitely look through the references for Angular, especially for the form controls, to take a look at all the ways that we can do the Angular form validations. All right, so I just noticed that I forgot to call these functions. So these are actually functions that we should call. Okay, so this is new form control, and so on. Now, as we call these functions, this is going to create a new form control for name. Now, if we add a default here, so the first parameter that we can add for form control would be a default value, and then the second parameters would be any validators that we want to apply to this form control. So for the name, I actually want to add a few of these validators, and so we're going to do validators dot. And now it's going to give me an error because it doesn't know what validators are, but I actually want to import validators. So in here under our forms, we can import validators. Okay, so validators is going to give me a bunch of ways that I can validate. So you'll notice we have max length, we have min length, and so on. I'm going to invoke this validator called required. Okay, so this means that the name is a required input. I'm also going to do validators dot, let's do a min length. Okay, so I'm going to say min length is 4, so you cannot have a name that is shorter than 4 characters. And we can also create our own custom validators. So I'm just going to come down here and let's create a validation called forbidden name validator. Okay, so forbidden, I have to spell it correctly, name validator. All right, so as an input, we're going to pass in a control, which is a form control. Okay, so this one, if you take a look at what we're passing in, this is going to be a name. This is going to be a validator that I'm going to apply to name. I'm going to give a list of invalid names to be put in. So this is going to be applied to name. So the name control is going to be passed in as a result. So here we're going to make a variable of invalid names. So maybe we'll say, bad words. What are some bad words? We'll say is a bad word. Is a bad word. Hell is a bad word. All right, you get the idea. So is a bad word. All right, so I don't let people create names that are of these strings. Okay, so I want to check it against these strings. So if the invalid names dot includes, and I'm going to take the control dot value dot trim. So I'm going to trim the value of whatever the name it is that's coming in. If this is the case, I'm going to return an object with a name error. All right, so this name error is just a variable that I'm creating. It doesn't have to be called name error. It's just an object that is going to return some kind of feedback for this validation error. So your name cannot be, and we're going to just add this to control dot value dot trim, so it cannot be this, whatever you've entered, but otherwise I'm going to return no. All right, so intuitively, when we create a validator, we're going to be given a control, in this case a form control, and we're going to return null if there's nothing wrong with it, and we're going to return an object if there is something wrong with it. So this is essentially an error object that we're returning. So in here under name, we are going to add as a validator the forbidden name validator as well. So this is going to be included. Now, this is going to give me an error, but I'm going to, so because this actually, I've written the function, but I haven't actually given a type to this. So I'm going to say as validate, validator function, I believe. All right, so validation function is something that I need to import from validation or from Angular Forms, and this should clear up that error. Okay. All right, so now I have a validator, and this is going to validate my form. Now, the problem is that right now you can see that I really don't get much feedback, right? So I can save it and I can even send this as a result, right? So I can even send this person with the name and then the instructor and the age. So one of the ways that we can manipulate this validation is we can go to this HTML and we can disable the button if this validation doesn't go through or if this validation is not equal to null. So there is this property called disabled. And I'm going to call form. So this is the form dot valid. So if it's not valid, so if it runs through the validation and if this form itself is not valid, then I'm going to disable this save. So if we take a look here, you see that I haven't typed in a name, and so this thing is disabled. So if I try to click on it, nothing happens. Okay, so let's show you one last type of validation, which is a form validator. So if there is some kind of validation that requires the whole form, like not only just the name, but maybe the whole form needs to be validated. So one example would be that let's say I have a list of instructor names and I only allow those names to be added as instructors. So if the instructor is checked and it doesn't fit one of those names, again, I want to say that this form is invalid. So I'm going to create a function here called form validator, and this is going to be in the form of validator function. Okay, this is equal to, and then I'm going to have a control. This time, this is going to be called an abstract control. So because this is the whole form that is being brought in, I'm going to, again, import this from the Angular forms. Okay, so this is going to be an abstract control, and as a result, we are going to have a validation errors or null. All right, so validation errors is an object that is, again, coming in from Angular forms, so I'm going to add that there as well. All right, so this is going to be a function. And I'm going to, let's create a const name, and this is going to be the control.get. So this is the whole form. I'm going to get the name, okay, and I'm going to get also the instructor. So I'm going to do another const instructor is equal to control.get, and this time I'm going to get the instructor. So these are the inputs for those corresponding inputs from the HTML form. I'm going to do a const, oops, I'm going to say these are the valid instructor names. All right, so let's say the valid instructor names are Bobby and Steve and Mary. Okay, so those are the only instructors I have in my system, and I'm going to return valid instructor names, call it names, dot includes, and then we'll take the name does not equal, or sorry, name not does not equal, dot value, dot trim, and the instructor dot value. So instructor dot value is going to give me a true or false. Okay, so depending on what this is, I'm going to, if it's giving me something, it's going to give, I'm going to create a form error. So form error, and I'm going to just make it true, but otherwise I'm going to make it null. Okay, so hopefully my logic is correct here. I am getting this complaining that this could possibly be null. If I'm sure that this INS control does exist, I'm going to force it to take those variables, and that should be okay. All right, so the last thing we need to do is I need to add that into my validation. So under form controls, we'll do validators, and validators, we can give an array of validators. So I'm going to do this dot form validator, and if we write more, I can write more as well, and I can put it into this array. All right, so I think this should do it. If we check back to here, it's disabled if the form is invalid somehow. All right, good. So if we come over here and let's do a refresh here, name. So you'll notice that if I type in a name like Henry, once I reach so let's see here. All right, so I found my error. So we want to, so the logic is that we want the instructor names to include the name and is an instructor, or it's not an instructor. In that case, there is no validation error. Otherwise, there is a validation error. Okay, so those are the only two cases that I allow this to pass. All right, so let's see if this works now. If we come back to the person and we try to add Henry, so you'll see that Henry, we after 4 characters, the save button becomes visible, and if we make Henry an instructor, this will again disable the button. So if we make this Mary, so Mary as an instructor is valid, so I can add Mary. Okay, so there's one last thing I wanted to do here. If we take a look at the validators that we wrote for name, we have a bunch of validators that we have here. So when the form is invalid, we want to know exactly which validators got invalid. So we're going to do an ngIf, and we're going to check for whether or not these controls have been invalid. So we'll do form.controls, and then we'll take the name. Okay, so that is associated with the name control, and we are going to do errors. So errors is the errors that we're going to get from the name control. and we're going to do as name error. So this is the variable that we're going to attach to it. And then out here, we can do a very quick interpolation, and we can do a name error. So we want to print out the name error, which currently is an object. I'm going to pipe it into JSON, which is a pipe that will just turn this object into JSON form so we can actually see it properly. All right, so let's save this, see it running in the background. I'm going to scroll down here and notice that if we don't type in any name, it's going to say required true. So this is actually an error object that we're getting back. If we start typing a word, give it TR, and then you see that this is still violating min length, right? So min length, the required length is 4, the actual length that we're getting is 2. And then if we start typing something else that is one of the invalid names, it'll say name error, your name cannot be stupid, right? So this is going to give us the custom validation that we wrote, and this was the custom error object that we were passing back. Okay, so I think this is all I wanted to show you in this video. But when we come back in the next video, I want to talk about services and how we can incorporate this into our application. So that's all I have. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.